Hello, everyone, and welcome to Gartner Live. My name is Mary Mesaglio. I'm a distinguished vice president for Gartner, and I'm here with Brian Burke, a research vice president with Gartner. Today, we're going to discuss the Gartner top technology trends for 2020, which were released last week at Gartner IT Symposium Expo in the Americas. But before we do that, here is a fun fact about Brian and me. We are colleagues and also friends, and also, to my knowledge, the only two Canadian analysts living in Europe, and we both live south of Barcelona. At least I do. Brian lives sometimes in his beach house south of Barcelona, sometimes in his ski chalet in Andorra. So, Brian, you are coming to us live from which one of those two places right now?
Oh, thanks, Mary. I'm here in Andorra today, up in the mountains, waiting for a bit more snow so the ski season can start, maybe in about a month.
I feel like you did something very right to have those two houses, and I so hope that the ski season doesn't become another COVID casualty. So let's start out by talking about how the top trends for 2021 are selected. I know we've been doing this for a whole bunch of years. What makes it into the list?
Well, we've been doing this for 16 years, and it's actually, one of the most anticipated pieces of research at Gartner. The process, takes a long time. So we start usually around end of February, beginning of March, and we start by planning, first of all, and then gathering. We have a call for papers where we gather the trends from ideas from across Gartner. And this year we had about 60 different ideas for trends. And then we go through a process with a group of analysts where we evaluate those, we combine some of them, we narrow down the list to, a list of about 10. And then that goes to our chiefs of research. They do a little bit more manipulation and massaging. And then we end up with a list that then we build out for this research and for the presentation.
Yeah, okay. All right, so let's get into that list. Now, I find when we do lists at Gartner, for CIO resolutions or top technology trends, we always have, our favorite or the one we're most interested in. So I want to start with that. What is the one that you're most interested in of all the top technology trends for 2021?
It's a good question. I would say maybe most interesting, not the one that I'm most interested in. Probably the most interesting one is because a little bit, in left field, is the Internet of Behaviors. And the Internet of Behaviors is really about collecting information from a lot of different sources and then combining that information and identifying behavioral events. And then you get a feedback loop. Through a feedback loop, you get a score. And the intent is to either upgrade or downgrade your experience based on your score. And that score is driven by those behaviors that you and behavioral events that have been registered in the system.
So, like for our audience, just the Internet of Behavior sounds kind of weird. Can you give us an example of how that might work?
Okay, so a very simple example. So with health insurance, for example, when you have health insurance and it is monitoring various behaviors like how much walking you do, how often you go to the gym, what you're eating, and that kind of thing. Discovery started this a couple of years ago in South Africa. And then giving you a feedback score, it encourages you to make healthy choices. And so that's one example of the Internet of Behaviors, but there's lots.
So I'm just going to say that there is a part of this trend that sounds really Orwellian and tricky to me, and like it could be misapplied in lots of ways. I don't know what you think.
There are implementations that we find a little bit creepy. In China, there's a social credit system that monitors all kinds of behaviors and adjusts people's social credit score that either gives them benefits or takes away opportunities if you have a higher or lower social credit score. So yeah, it can be a little bit creepy.
Yeah, that's the Internet of Behaviors. Okay, so just for viewers listening out there, we will be taking live questions from the audience, so do go ahead and leave them in the comments and we will collect them there. Let's go to the other end of the spectrum. So that's kind of invasive and potentially creepy, also cool in some ways if you apply it properly. But on the other end of the spectrum, we have trends that are kind of privacy focused, like what we call privacy enhancing computation. Can you tell us what that is?
Yeah, first of all, it's probably most important where that's coming from. And what privacy enhancing computation does is it helps companies to maintain the privacy around information, so personally identifiable information, for example, while that data is in use. So, keeping data private when it's not in use is relatively straightforward, but keeping data private when it's in use, when you're sharing it with partners, when you're leveraging service providers, is challenging. And so what privacy enhancing computation does is there's different schemes. So things like differential privacy or homomorphic computing that takes that data and encrypts it, or there's various strategies so that the data can be used, but the privacy is maintained. It's also used for algorithms and AI models. If you don't want, to give away the entire model, you can use homomorphic encryption to give away the model, let people use the model, but you don't lose the intellectual property in that model. So that's what that's about.
Okay, so like you can use the data, you can manipulate the data, but you're not giving up all of your privacy. You can send the data, but you're not giving up your privacy in any one of those contexts. Okay, all right. So there's some stuff that's going to help us stay private, which is good. It also seems to me that in this list we have some trends that are really accelerated by COVID. So it's what Gartner calls anywhere operations and total experience. Can you tell our viewers a little bit about those two trends?
Yeah, there have been actually a number of trends that have been accelerated by COVID. Anywhere operations is probably the most significant. Whereas, at least in Europe and in the US in March, we suddenly had everybody, all of our employees who were non-essential, working from home. And so for many organizations, they weren't prepared for that. And that was a bit of a panic to get those people up and working from home. But when you look at the broader picture with anywhere operations, you're really looking at not only are your employees working remotely, but your customers are remote. So if you're in sales, the people that you're selling to are also remote, and business operations also need to be able to be distributed everywhere. So really, that anywhere operations is really about rethinking the way that we're delivering services, so that we're remote first and digitally driven, so that we can shift those services to wherever they're required. And that's really what that's about.
I just have to say that's kind of like what we're doing right now, right? I mean, I'm sitting here delivering this LinkedIn Live interview from in front of my cookbooks. You're doing it from your Andorran ski chalet, and we're delivering this out to people who are probably in their homes all over the world. So we're doing anywhere operations right now live. Tell us about total experience.
Yeah, okay. Just another point on anywhere operations. I delivered a presentation at Symposium in Asia Pacific at 3:00 this morning. So, we're everywhere. Total experience really about how we're combining different experience disciplines. So last year we talked about multi-experience, and multi-experience is really changing the way that we deliver technologies. So instead of having, interacting with a virtual world through a screen and a keyboard, we're now, having the way we perceive the virtual world through augmented reality and mixed reality, virtual reality, and the way that we interact through conversational interfaces and gesture control. So that's multi-experience. And now, multi-experience and employee experience and customer experience and user experience in most organizations are all different disciplines. And so bringing these together is where we have total experience. And so, organizations are focusing on how do they deliver that, integrated total experience to their customers and to their employees, bringing together, advanced user experience and technologies for delivering in multi-experience. So that's really what that one's about.
So customer experience plus employee experience plus, and trying to get an integrated front. Employee experience is a bit of a big deal. I'm not going to get this exactly right, but I remember reading some research yesterday that said something like 69% of people who feel that their job has an impact are much more motivated to stay and are not looking to leave the organization they work for in the next 6 months versus those who don't feel like they have an impact. So maybe part of that employee experience is, do I feel like my job matters? Do I feel like what I'm doing actually matters?
Well, with the COVID-19 and so many people working from home, employee experience has become extraordinarily important. And talking to people in our HR practice, we're using different tools to be able to understand how their experience is evolving in terms of the services that we're providing, and then trying to improve those services. So this is just one aspect of that.
Yeah, really interesting. Total experience. Okay. So, you and I chatted before this interview, and we were talking about, what's your favorite trend and stuff. And you said, well, there's the thing that's maybe most interesting, but then there's the trend that's going to have the biggest impact. And so for you, what is the trend that is going to have the biggest impact on this list?
Well, I think that, that AI engineering is actually going to have the biggest impact.
Which I just have to say, for viewers who haven't heard that before, like the first time I heard that, I was thinking AI engineering sounds like robots are going to take over the world. So I'm hoping it's not that. Tell us what it is.
Yeah, it's not that scary. It's a little simpler than that. For organizations right now, AI has been useful for organizations, high-tech organizations, the tech giants. But AI in end user companies hasn't been that successful. Only 11% of projects move from proof of concept into production. And so AI engineering...
11%.
11%, yeah. So AI engineering is really about putting in place the disciplines so that we can have repeatable success in our AI projects. And so I think that the opportunities are enormous for AI in end user organizations, but we really need to focus on, how can we deliver that repeatable application development, model development, data, because all of those things change all the time in AI, and to be able to deliver those projects. And where AI is going is becoming interesting as well, with things like generative AI, where we're actually creating new models of new things using AI. You've seen that with things like, people who don't exist and that kind of stuff. But actually, that technology is also useful for things like developing new drug compounds or developing new materials that have specific properties. And so I'm really excited about that trend as well.
Okay, so like when I was researching that trend after my reaction of robots are taking over the world, right? It looked like what we're saying is AI is now like an outpost, where it's a specialized team with these specialized skills doing these specialized things. And now we want to make it a core part of regular development so that it can become a core part of all the activities we do and not some kind of add-on or outpost or extra thing or afterthought. Is that right or is that wrong?
That's exactly it. AI is getting infused into all of our technologies. But right now, we're not very effective at doing that. And so this is really about doing that in an effective, repeatable manner.
Especially for end user companies, getting that 11% up. Yeah. All right.
Exactly.
Okay. So, so this is a technology trends piece of research. And so let's get techie for a second. When I look at the list, there's sort of three big tech trends that I see on there. The first one is obviously about cloud, because we can't have a top technology trends piece of research at Gartner without cloud, such a big deal. So we call it distributed cloud. What is that?
Well, distributed cloud is really the next generation in cloud computing. So cloud, when we talk about distributed cloud, well, let me start with when we talk about cloud, we often think of cloud as this, it's out there, it's a centralized service that we access. Actually, it is somewhat distributed today, usually regionally distributed, but distributed cloud is where we're being able to have cloud services that are provided by cloud services providers wherever they're required. And so it really solves the problem of organizations that are having to run private cloud in their data centers, because private cloud is actually really hard to manage. And so it allows a cloud service provider to provide public cloud services and displacing or replacing that private cloud in our data center managed by the public cloud service provider. Or if we have IoT, so if we've got a wind farm or something like that, we want to manage those devices using edge cloud services. Again, a cloud service provider can manage those devices using an edge cloud, distributed edge cloud, to be able to do that. So location becomes important now with cloud, and we can have much more, offload much of the management responsibilities to cloud service providers regardless of where the cloud services are required.
I got you. So it's sort of like we get all the resilience and integrity and heavy lifting of the public cloud, but with the concerns for maybe geopolitical concerns or regulatory concerns. It can't leave this geography. So you kind of, it's like a win-win. It sounds like to me.
Yeah, no, it is. It really is a win-win. And what's driving this? What drove people to use private cloud services is that they've got data residency requirements. They've got latency requirements. Yeah. I was speaking to a bank in an offshore bank, and they were saying, we would really like to use cloud services for everything. So to have, our email and file storage and all of that, but we can't let that outside of our jurisdiction. So distributed cloud allows the cloud service provider to provide those services in the jurisdiction, so that they can leverage those cloud services, public cloud services, without violating their data residency requirements.
I got it. That sounds all good. What about this other techie kind of trend, which is called cybersecurity mesh? What is that all?
Cybersecurity mesh is really an evolution of security. So it's a different way of thinking, in that in the past, the way that we thought about security was we have a walled garden around the organization. So we have that basically the perimeter, security perimeter, is around the organization, and everything that is going in and out of the organization goes through the organization. But with cybersecurity mesh, what we do is we're really separating the authorization to use a particular data asset from the actual access to that data asset. So we don't have to have everything going through the firewall, so to speak. We can have that access directly, and so it leverages technologies like cloud access service brokers and others to be able to shift the security perimeter from around the organization to around the individual. And we can allow individuals to have access to digital assets no matter where they are, no matter where the individual is, and no matter where the digital asset is. And so that's the real advantage of the cybersecurity mesh. And it becomes important because more and more of our digital assets are now outside of the organization. And of course, more and more of our people are outside of the organization. So this just simplifies the view of how they access information.
Okay, I think I get it. Okay, the last sort of techie trend that I saw on this list is another one that sort of feels dystopian to me. I'm not going to lie. We're calling it hyperautomation. So again, I kind of feel like the robots are taking over the world. And should people be afraid for their jobs? What is hyperautomation? What does that mean?
Okay, well, first of all, people shouldn't be afraid for their jobs because hyperautomation really starts with task level automation. And with task level automation, that's, automating repetitive tasks in the organization. So that just makes people's work more interesting, frankly. But then we move to...
So we're automating the drudgery, is what you're saying.
Automating the drudgery as well.
Okay,
but then we move to process automation. And with process automation, we're leveraging tools like intelligent business process management suites and artificial intelligence to provide situationally adaptive responses to when problems occur. So when there's process bottlenecks and those kinds of things. Where we're going to is automating across functions, so within an organization, and ultimately automating across a business ecosystem. So as you add to the breadth of the automation, then you increase the impact of automation. But we're not really looking at automating jobs per se. It's more looking at automating processes and interactions within the organization and outside of the organization as well.
Okay, I get it. So it's sort of like the doing the dishes version of your job. Can we automate that? And so these little tasks that are, okay, I like that. That sounds kind of good, actually. I was instructed over and over again to do this, and I forgot. I need to remind viewers, please, we are taking questions a little bit later in the broadcast, just in a couple of minutes. So if you do have questions, we've gotten a bunch already, but if you do have some, please put them in the comments. I was supposed to say that a couple more times than I did, so feel free, go crazy. All right, so there's a last trend, Brian, that is one of the big themes for IT Symposium Expo this year, and that is this notion of intelligent, composable business. And I thought we would close out the interview on that before we go to live questions. So just tell us what that is.
Okay. So intelligent composable business is a shift in the way that we're, first of all, accessing information. So we have the data fabric, which is a different way of accessing information in the organization, where we're leveraging data, and particularly active metadata, to understand what that information is, and leveraging AI to be able to access that information. But then, from a services delivery perspective, we've got packaged business capabilities. And a packaged business capability, you can think of that as a chunk of functionality, right? And they are integrated. They can be integrated through APIs. Now, packaged business capabilities could be developed by vendors, or they could be developed in-house. But the idea is that you can compose applications using these packaged business capabilities, and then rapidly recompose these applications as business conditions change, or you can really customize those applications for different groups or even individuals. So that's the intelligent composable enterprise. One of the things that we saw with COVID-19 is, of course, immediately after it struck here in Europe and North America in March and China earlier, we had a radical reconfiguration of our businesses, and our rigid business processes and applications simply broke. So intelligent composable business answers that question of how do we rapidly configure and reconfigure the services that we're delivering for the organization.
Ultimately so that we can be more agile and respond more quickly to all the changes that we've seen happen in COVID and all the other disruptions that I'm sure are on the way. Okay, so I just want to shift gears and go into some of the live questions that we have gotten from the audience. So Brian, question number 1 is from Ildiko from Romania, who asks, how does the Internet of Behaviors leverage data and data analytics? So what's expected to be the impact on data trends in 2021 in that respect? So Internet of Behaviors, how does that leverage data and data analytics, and what's the impact for 2021? Any thoughts?
Well, yeah, sure. So one of the things that's enabling the Internet of Behaviors is the simple fact that it's much easier to collect a lot of information. Now, I talked about China's social credit system. They're collecting all kinds of information. So a lot of information from a lot of different sources. And so you can think of sources like, facial recognition or license plate readers or all kinds of things where we can collect information. So we get a lot of data. And then we identify those behavioral events through analytics, and then, provide that feedback loop. So what we're seeing, of course, is that we've got massive volumes of data that we are analyzing. And one of the other side trends that we'll see is because we've got so much data coming from these IoT devices, we see more and more of that processing move to the IoT device itself. So we're seeing exceptional data, so exceptions that are coming through for more central processing. So there's it's a huge data question, really. And the problem isn't too little data. The problem is, frankly, too much, and being able to manage that data effectively.
I have to say, I feel like that every day when I look at my inbox and just go, oh my gosh, I am not managing my data effectively. So I empathize with that. Okay, question number 2 is from Harris in North Carolina, who asks, can you tell us more about the Internet of Behavior? Where can we learn more about this trend? People are really interested in the Internet of Behavior. So can we learn more about this trend? I'm hoping you're going to say we have lots of Gartner research written on this. What do you say to that, Brian?
We do have research written on the Internet of Behaviors, absolutely. And so with this, top strategic technology trends, we publish a research note when we announced the trends last Monday. And so there is more information, or you can talk to, myself or one of the subject matter experts, and we'd be happy to talk about lots of different examples of how organizations are leveraging this today and could be leveraging it in the future.
I'll just point out that, Paris, I don't know if you're a Gartner client or not, there's some information that is behind the paywall, which is a research note that might be published. There's some information that is free for everybody, which would be Smarter with Gartner as a resource. And there's also a video of Brian's and my colleague, Dave Curley, talking about these trends. So there's some stuff that is accessible to everyone. Depends on if you're a client or not, how much you can get access to. Looks like question number 3 is from Darren from California, who asks, outside of these trends, are you seeing any related to data center and edge computing related to 5G? Anything related to data
5G.
center and edge computing related to 5G? Yeah. Any thoughts?
Well, yeah, certainly 5G. 5G is a big part of that. For example, distributed cloud picture. What we see is that with distributed cloud, what that's going to move to, it's not there yet, but what it's going to move to is distributed cloud managed by 5G devices or 5G networks. Excuse me. And often those are going to be private 5G. So if you're a manufacturer or something like that, and you have a lot of IoT devices that you want to manage, and you don't have 5G access now, what organizations are doing is putting in private 5G to be able to manage those devices using 5G networks. And so, yes, edge devices, Internet of Things, 5G, all goes together. And what we're seeing more and more of is that private 5G is being used for those services.
Sorry, this might be a really basic question, but just for viewers who are not as technologically oriented, when you say private 5G, do you mean we're not waiting for the telco provider?
Exactly. So we're not waiting for the telco provider to provide 5G in our neighborhood. What we're doing is we're moving forward, often with a telco provider, by the way, but moving forward to provide 5G in the location that we require 5G.
Yeah. Okay, I gotcha. All right. So Andy from the UK asks, will public cloud providers take control and provide support for on-premise private cloud environment? Sounds like this one's about distributed cloud. Any thoughts, Brian?
Yeah, that's going to be the first wave with distributed cloud, is where public cloud service providers are going to be taking over private cloud, or being able to provide public cloud services in your data center, which means that for organizations that haven't been able to leverage private cloud so far, they have an option that gives them private cloud capabilities, but not with the management responsibility. That stays with the cloud service provider. So the answer is yes. That's going to be the first and most impactful thing that we're going to see, use case we're going to see with distributed cloud. So the answer is yes. It's coming. It's actually available today. So it's something, if you have a need, you should be looking into.
Okay, so we only have about 90 seconds left. So Kevin from Texas, and Nita from Indonesia, and Balakumara from Sri Lanka, and Christina from Barcelona, we aren't going to get to your questions, but I will try and follow up with you separately if I can find you. In the meantime, I just wanted to say, Brian, thank you very much for joining me. It was so fun. For those of you in the audience, if you'd like to experience this session and more Gartner research, you can register today for IT Symposium Expo in Asia Pacific. That's happening this week. You can also visit Smarter with Gartner, which I mentioned earlier. That is full of resources where you can also download the ebook on the top technology trends that we've published and read a whole bunch more on all sorts of other topics. Links to both of these are in the description of this post. So thank you very much for joining me. I'm Mary Mesaglio. Thanks for watching Gartner Live.